Today I'm going to show how to install Linux on a new virtual machine in Oracle VM VirtualBox Manager. Of course, to be able to install this requires the installation of Oracle VM VirtualBox Manager, which is shown in a previous video, for which the link is available in the description here. And this also requires an ISO image of your Linux distribution. In our case, this will be Fedora Workstation. You can find the ISO image on the Fedora webpage. You download the ISO image and you make sure that you have this local copy available. Also, how to create a new virtual machine in the VirtualBox Manager is explained in a previous video, which is also available as a link in the description of this video. Before we can actually install this, it's important to check that your settings of your virtual machine are correct. For this, we go to settings, and especially the storage settings and the system settings are important. With the storage settings, it's important that as a virtual hard drive, we have the ISO image of our Fedora Workstation mounted to that optical drive. And then in a second step, it's also important to have the boot order correct. At this moment, we have a virtual hard drive which is empty because we still need to install Linux, and we have our Fedora Workstation image mounted to the optical drive. The boot order here is important, so we need to have the hard drive as a first boot instance and the optical drive as a second one. If you change that order, it's very well possible that each time that you boot your virtual machine, it will ask you to install Fedora over and over and over again, which is of course not what we want. So the first time we will try to boot from our hard drive. The hard drive is empty, so we will check the optical drive, and there we will find the installation media for Fedora Workstation. We will use this to install Fedora on the hard drive, so that the second time that we boot, we will boot from the hard drive where Fedora will be installed. So this is one of the most important settings that we have. And if this is correct, we can start the installation process by running or booting that virtual machine. Again, if you don't have a virtual machine yet with the correct settings, then you can review the previous video. We will start our virtual machine, and this will prompt us with a boot message. Here we have the possibility to start Fedora Workstation Live, to test and start this media, or to perform troubleshooting. We will start Fedora Workstation Live, so I will use the arrow keys on my keyboard to go to the first option, and then I press enter. You can remove the auto capture keyboard message, or you can disable it. Disable is a better option. And then we need to wait for the boot process to begin. Also, the message for the mouse pointer integration can be ignored. When the live image of Fedora is booted, you will see that we can get the option to install Fedora to our hard drive. And we select this by clicking on the icon. The first thing during setup is to select the appropriate language. English. You select which language to use, United Kingdom, and we continue. And in the next step, we have some localization settings to complete, but also some system settings. For the localization settings, it's important to adjust the keyboard to the keyboard layout that you have. For us, this is not an English keyboard layout, but I have an AZERTY keyboard layout, which is a Belgian keyboard layout. So I will type Belgian. And you can type French, Belgian, add. We can even check this. So when we select the keyboard layout, we can check if the keyboard layout is correct. And indeed, this seems to be the keyboard layout that I have. At this moment, the first one which was available, the English keyboard layout, is still there. So I remove this one with the minus button, so that only the French Belgian keyboard layout is retained. I submit the setting with done. My time and date zone seems to be correct, so the Europe-Brussels time zone. And then we need to specify where to install our software, and this will be on our virtual hard drive. So make sure that the first one is selected, which is done by default, and then I just selected done. So I don't actually need to change any settings, but I need to specify that the virtual hard drive should be used. And then the next step, I select begin installation. Once the installation process is completed, which does take some time, you select finish installation. And we will be able to reboot the system for the first time. For this, we go to the upper right corner, we go to power off log out, and we select restart. Restarting our freshly installed virtual machine will be the second boot of the system. This time, the system will boot from the virtual hard drive where we have just installed our Fedora Workstation and not from the optical drive anymore. The first time we reboot, we wait for a pop-up message, and on that setup pop-up message, we select Start Setup. We disable the location and the automatic problem reporting settings. We will not enable any third-party repositories. And we will create a new user. As this setup is part of the Linux operating systems course at the Advanced Bachelor of Bioinformatics from West, we will create a new user called guest. And for guest, we will set up a password, and we will all choose the same password, which is West 2022. Don't forget, and you can see that this happened, that your numlock should be enabled. So I enable numlock and I type 2022. We'll do the same to confirm West 2022. I recommend to all use the same password because when we encounter any problem, we all know each other's password to help each other. We select next. And we start using Fedora Linux. At this moment, you can shut down the virtual machine. Before we can actually start to work with this virtual machine, we will need to adjust some important settings and perform some system updates, which will be demonstrated in a next video.